Well, I think we're ready. And I gotta keep an eye on some of this. Before I start, I wanted to bring up something, and that is, bless you, quiz 4. And let's see, Blake, Dylan, Eddie, Lily, Emma, that's who we're getting. So I had a due date on it as last night. I have 20 students. You know how many of those I got in?
How many? 3?
10.
Wow.
Well, I leave it open for a while because some of you guys have accommodations. You get extra time. And I'm actually good with that. But of the 10, I only have 5 people listed as getting accommodations. And so what I want to ask you to do is pay attention. Pay attention. Don't turn on your Zoom and walk away. Don't, how should I say this? Come back and turn it off and not watch. I post a video of the class. I need you to look at your to-do list on the home page on Canvas. That shows up there, right? It says to do. I get it. You should get it too. We're running out of time and things are going to get, we're going to be moving quickly here towards the end. But when half the class it doesn't have anything turned in and I'm not seeing you guys, and I got most of you guys are online right now, and I've only talked to a few of you about why that is. So pay attention. We got to get through this. I want you to get something out of all of this. And so I can't do that if you turn me off. So I'm going to quit harping. And I want to start talking about the artwork. But if you haven't done that quiz yet, please get it in. Get it in. This is important. We're running out of time. I'm trying to get you through this presentation. I want you guys to do so well that your head explodes.
Or my mushroom.
Or yeah, something.
But my mushroom.
Ow.
My mushroom's head needs all the brains it can fit in there.
I know. Well, we got plenty of brains here, but we gotta stay focused on the task. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit today about Gothic in Europe, and I'm gonna talk about the next chapter, chapter 14, which is Italian, late medieval Italian. And that's it. That's the last of the European that we see. After that, we're going to start doing a little globe trotting and talk about some of the other cultures, some of the non-Western cultures. And so this, take a look at this. It's kind of beat up. Of course it is. It's only like 850 years old, but just. Oh, wow. I've got another participant. Let's see. I don't like keep doing this either, but I got to give people credit when they're here. If they're here, I don't see it. Okay. This is old. These are statues in the doorway of Chartres Cathedral, one of the biggest, most important structures of medieval times and of the Gothic era. I'm getting confused because I keep hearing somebody log on, but I don't see people, so.
I thought I heard someone log off just now,
Yeah, that's what I heard.
That's what I thought.
but who was it?
I don't know.
Good question.
Well, log on, I count you here and then log off. See you later. Yes, I don't know.
Oh, and they're back.
Sometimes people's internet connections are bad too, you know, in all fairness.
Sometimes I.
Probably is that.
Yeah. Oh, Blake, we're missing you, dude.
I know. I'm actually working on the quiz right now. I'm actually almost done with it.
Well, good. Good. I like that.
Sorry, it keeps kicking me out of the Zoom.
Okay, Evelyn, yeah. All right. Well, here's what we got. We'll start with this. These are what they call jam figures, J-A-M-B. It's really a doorway. And in Gothic times, this is what sculpture looked like. And take a look at this. It would give me some adjectives about this. Kind of realistic, kind of not realistic. Kind of looks like a kind of simplistic cutting figures, say, like out of a log or something. It still maintains that kind of roundness. And the drapery, yeah, that's kind of sophisticated, but not nearly like what we saw in ancient Greece. This is just kind of, it doesn't really describe the form that's underneath the drapery. I'm going to take a look at the Elgin marbles, for example, the Parthenon sculptures, classical Greek sculpture. You could see the whole shape of the body underneath the clothing, and they call that diaphanous clothing because you could see right through it. It was almost like if they were wearing silk or nylon or something. But these, on the other hand, is kind of formulaic. You make them tall, you kind of got the proportions of where the arms should be. Faces, okay, but compared to classical Greek sculpture, classical Roman sculpture, this is not there. Although their engineering skills, building these beautiful cathedrals, their engineering skills are off the charts. But in terms of sculpture, they're doing okay, but I wanted to show you the sculpture because this is kind of a way to see how they improve. Now, this is Chartres South transept, and check the difference out. See, 1145, 1220. A matter of 75 years. Look at how much lifelike these sculptures become. And with a lot of other little symbolism going on too. Take a look at some of the things going on here, like even the pedestals. You can see these figures looking up. You can see here, these, I don't know exactly what they are. They look like maybe they're dogs or pigs or something, bottom line. You can see the form better. These are, would you agree, much more lifelike, and they got that much better in 75 years. Now, there's a number of factors in getting, quote, better at this. probably first and foremost is that you have to have skill to do that. And we lost a lot of knowledge, we lost a lot of information, we lost a lot of culture during those so-called dark ages. And so there wasn't this continuous line of sculpture that went from Greece to Rome through the Middle Ages. They almost had to reinvent everything in those Middle Ages because everything broke down. So you got to have the skill and the knowledge. And the second thing you have to have is that you have to believe that this is important enough to do. For the original statues at Chartres, this was like just good enough. And they were still kind of more or less dealing with how much you should do or how you should do iconography. And the idea of doing a lifelike sculpture or sculpture so lifelike that it fools you that you almost think that these figures are going to come to life, and that really wasn't quite that important. What was important was the symbology of all of this. And we talked about that with the iconography. We talked about that with the Madonna, Saint Theodore, Saint George, which, by the way, somebody's writing about that. Was that you, Nathan? No.
No, I haven't really gotten to the specifics of mine yet.
Oh, all right. I know Hagia Sophia. Good call. Anyway, but it really wasn't that important. It was important that you get the idea, but the idea is just enough. And that is the Madonna with St. George and St. Theodore. It's iconic. It gives you the idea, but it doesn't have to be particularly lifelike. It doesn't have to be attached so much to this world, because in some respects, these figures are what you might call otherworldly. These are people from the past. These are from the Old Testament. These people are in heaven. These people exist in the Bible. And so there's no real need to make them lifelike and bring them into the present. But as you can see, that's starting to change. That's starting to change, and it's changing rather rapidly. And so anyway, I was showing you the cathedrals, and they're just magnificent. And zooming in, this is where a lot of those sculptures would exist, in the doorways a lot, and low reliefs all other places, but this was the main part. And it was there because the people who would walk into the cathedrals would have this reminder, these examples of saintly people and all of the prophets from the Bible. So when these, we talked about the rose window, and so here, this is the 14th, this is like in the 1300s. And look at this, Virgin and Child. And this, I would argue, is even more lifelike than what we see here. Maybe not, but you can see we're moving that way. And it's more than just an idea. And I want to kind of zoom in on this. See what she's holding? It's hard to make it out. It's not a really good photo.
In which arm?
Where my hand is here. It's her right arm, but it's on our left side.
I don't know why I think of blue.
Well, I would say it's a lily flower, the fleur de lis.
Oh, I actually didn't catch the I didn't actually have the full part of the top.
Right, I get it, because it is hard to see. But, you know, we're using some of the same ideas that were developed in Byzantine times, and they're still kind of dealing with the idea of Christ as a child. But look, he's got not like baby fat, he's like that, he's like, looks like if he took his face, he would say, this guy's like 45 years old. Wouldn't you? What do you think? And the hair, lots of hair for a baby. But again, the idea of the Jesus knowing that why he's here, and God being the Son of God and being all-knowing and being an infant that would be innocent and everything's new and fresh, like it is to a baby. So anyway, but that is sculpture. And in the 13th century, much more lifelike. This drapery, compare this again to our guys. Did I pass it up? I did. Like this. So that was really the one big point I wanted to make about Gothic art. We looked at the cathedrals, which is really the big contribution to art and architecture, and the sculpture advances tremendously during this time period. And so let me continue. Late medieval Italy. Slideshow from the beginning. And so this is the map of Italy around 1400, which is really kind of the last year when I wrote that prompt for what you should research. I said before 1400. 1400, at least in terms of Western art, that's kind of the turning point. After 1400, we call it the early or proto-Renaissance. And everything changes. And I got another participant. Who would that be? Yeah. And what's that? Oh, Victor, got it. Anyway, we see this map change all the time. I always like to kind of point this out. This here is modern day Italy. All of this area that's color is modern day Italy. But we don't see this big Italy. We see this broken up into many, many pieces. And that's the way Italy was governed. And in fact, their model was probably closer to the Greek model, where they had city-states, hyphenated city-state. And so Athens, for example, was its own country. It's Greek, but it's had its own government, had its own culture. Sparta, same thing. That's an ancient idea of a city-state. The Italians do that. And so we have these papal states that run through the center of this, but the Republic of Siena, the Republic of Florence, the Republic of Venice up here. And so those are the cities, and they are city-states. Another little point about that is that actually Italy stays like this until like almost the 20th century. These other countries, France, Germany, England, Spain, they consolidate and they're not a city state anymore, they're a state. There's not a city state of London or a city state of Paris. You got France, and it's a big country, and they consolidate and they have more power. Not so much in Italy. And what proof do I have that they didn't really have a lot of power? Italy did not get in on colonizing the rest of the world. That all happened in the 18th, 19th centuries when English, well, we've been colonized over here by a number of European countries, the English for one, but this was a French colony, Louisiana, and it was a Spanish colony as well. The Spaniards were in first because their guy, Columbus, actually discovered. That's a term we use quite loosely. Americas. And so anyway, they don't advance. They stay with this city-state model for a long time. It has some benefits, though. One of the things that happens in Italy, and especially around 1400, they're on the Mediterranean Sea. And they're on the trade route. And all of these countries in the Middle East that are really prosperous, those countries that were the former Byzantine Empire, now the Ottoman Turks, and a lot of these places, all the way going to India and China. The trade route for all of the stuff coming from those countries or those areas was through Italy. They were situated in a way sticking right out into the Mediterranean Sea that they could trade with the rest of the world. And all of the goods, the spices, everything came through Italy. So Columbus Day, October 12th. He sailed to the Caribbean, claimed all of this new world, as they called it, for Spain. But was he Spanish? No, he was Italian, because these guys were all making money. And they were the place where all of the high tech was going on. This was like the Silicon Valley and Wall Street and all of that stuff rolled in together, and it stayed that way. So there was no real incentive to change something that was working out so well. But that was this trading, it was wealthy. And so this is Italy around 1400. But there's another factor that changed things in the 14th century, just prior to 1400. In fact, roughly around 1350. Anybody know what this might be? The bubonic plague. The Black Death. And a lot of scholars think that, we talk about COVID, where did it come from? People talking about, well, it started in China or something like that. Well, there's been a lot of scholarship trying to figure out where the bubonic plague came from, especially because it killed like perhaps as many as 70 million people. 70 million is the low estimate, 200 million is the high estimate. And the population of the world was not near what it is today. So this was like about 20 times COVID, And so anyway, talking about that, a lot of people theorized that the bubonic plague came along this trade route. And that it was the vector, what was carrying this plague was rats. And rats frequently would board onto ships when they pulled into these ports. And they'd have to be real careful, but rats would climb on, would walk across the ropes that would moor the ships, and they would infest the ships. Why would rats go to ships like that? I haven't asked any rats lately, but the theory is that these ships oftentimes had food, exotic food. They had food, you know, like if you were in Italy and you wanted bananas, you can't grow bananas, say, in Italy. You have to haul them by sea. And so any grain, all kinds of things, spices, a lot of edible stuff. And the rats would hop on the ship and they dock and the rats would get loose and anyway, you got a plague. And it wasn't the rats themselves, it was the fleas that infested the rats, that infested the ships that were on the trade routes. That's what we think. But bottom line, you have this prosperous part of Europe, way more prosperous than the rest of Europe. And then all of a sudden, like 50% of the people die of the plague. What would having half the population do to a country? I know it's a gruesome topic. What do you think? How about this? How about there was a lot more wealth to go around? That's one thing. That would happen here today. Half of the cars out in the parking lot would have no owners because they died. You would be awash in cars, and the price of cars, used cars, would go way down. There would be a lot of things that there would be as much wealth, but fewer people to share the wealth with. Does that make sense to you? In kind of a way. It's not really quite that simple, but in a lot of ways it is that simple. Because the people who survived became much more wealthy. And so if half the people died, you could just knock down the crummy houses and the rest of the people move into the good houses. Just say, like I was saying about the cars, of course, they didn't have cars then, but a lot of things. If you had a farm and your neighbor next door died, your farm could, in theory, be twice as big. You would have your 40 acres and their 40 acres. So anyway, it's a lot of things happen out of this plague, and it created circumstances that we'll see here. Duccio, Buonisegna. We just call this guy Duccio because before the Ninja Turtles of Michelangelo, Leonardo, Donatello, and Raphael, those are all first names. We had the old Ninja Turtles, and Duccio, we just call him Duccio. There's another guy in here, we just call him Giotto. It's part of the art history thing. But look at this. virgin and child enthroned with saints, Mesta, excuse me. Siena Cathedral, Siena. Where was Siena? Where did we see that? That's right here. It's just north of Rome. And they were prosperous. And so they really started building a lot of stuff. But there's something that's really quite different about this. And they talk about these guys, Duccio and Giotto, as being the fathers, if you will, of the Italian Renaissance. So we've seen the Madonna enthroned. We've seen that already. We've seen that from some 700-800 years prior to this. And we got it. We've seen it in sculptural form at Notre Dame. We have this. And this is a painting. And a lot of the same characteristics, but it's really right out of Byzantine art. Siena Cathedral, but there's something else that's really kind of different too. And that is what? It's different because they're starting to make this more lifelike. As I was showing you the sculpture getting more lifelike, in Italy, painting gets more lifelike. And it's really, like I said, what inspired the Renaissance in Italy. And these guys from the 15th century just look back at this from the early 14th century, 100 years later, look back and say, this is genius. And you can see it still has some of the same traits, comes right out of Byzantine, same iconography, dark, this is supposed to be dark blue. That's what the Madonna is dressed in with the head covering. And this is the baby Jesus. Same iconography. He's not holding a book or giving a blessing. And he kind of looks even a little bit more infant-like too. So they start pushing the painting to become more lifelike in the same way that sculpture became more lifelike in Gothic France. And so we see the Madonna enthroned, but this is actually a pretty fair attempt at trying to create the illusion of depth. And if you take a look at how these lines converge, this is almost like linear perspective. Those of you who have taken drawing, you know what I'm talking about. It's where all of the lines converge on a horizon line at a vanishing point. It's a way to create the illusion of three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional surface. It's just simply that. And that is what's going on here. However, this is what you would call approximate perspective, approximate linear perspective. And why I say it's approximate, they didn't really have a formula. That won't come for another 100 years. And they figure out basically 100 years after this that you can do this mathematically. But this is intuitive or approximate perspective, but it works. It looks like it is a three-dimensional space, much more than anything we've seen to this time, at least in the Christian era. Now we see some of that in Pompeii, where they actually make things that look like they have depth, like it's a deep space. But that kind of went away. It wasn't important until these Italians started doing this. And so Duccio. And there's another thing another device, and we use this in painting as well, to create the illusion of deep space. What would that be? Not talking, eh? That would be overlapping. When something overlaps, you get the idea that something is behind something else. And so you see these as forward, and they overlap these figures, and these figures overlap these figures. We didn't see anybody attempt anything like that, not through the whole Byzantine period. And in fact, what you see in Byzantine is that they would separate figures out. So they wouldn't have this idea of overlapping space. The only place that you'd see that on the Madonna that I talk about is those angels that are up on the top. But it wasn't done to this extent. And again, they weren't interested in naturalism. And in Italy, this is in Pisa, this is a pulpit of the baptistry, and they really start developing sculpture as well. And so this is almost like what you see in the later Gothic cathedrals. And again, look at the quality, the lifelike characteristics of this sculpture as compared to what I was just showing you from the last chapter, where they look kind of stiff, their form was just not there. And this shows action. And they're not just standing there posed and stiff. Look at this, there's all kind of stuff going on. And you can see these people they seem to be interacting with each other. They seem to be doing things. That's amazing. That's another level of naturalism. And here's another part of that pulpit. And you can see this is Annunciation. Carter, what you got?
That pulpit reminds me of pulpit.
Oh, phonetically.
It sounds similar.
Yeah, well, yeah. And this is the pulpit. You know what a baptistry is, by the way? Back in these times, there was a separate building from the church or the cathedral, and it was where baptisms would take place. That's why it's called a baptistry. And so, yeah, and they would, this would be the pulpit, and whoever was preaching climbed up this ladder. You see that back there? And would preach from the pulpit. Berlingeri, St. Francis. St. Francis, as I was talking about Virgin being predominant in French Gothic, St. Francis becomes predominant in Christian Italy at that time. And so we have this, and it's actually telling a story. It kind of looks more like what you would see in manuscript illustration. San Francesco. That's Italian. For the Spanish, San Francisco. That's what, or St. Francis in English. And so is in Assisi, that's the hometown. That's St. Francis was, by the way, he was a monk. And he was a monk that preached kindness towards all living things. And he would go out from the monastery and take walks in the woods. And it was said that he would preach the gospel to the animals that he met in the woods. And they talk about how if he was, these stories about if a mosquito was to bite him, he wouldn't kill it. He would let the mosquito just bite him because he had respect for all living things. That's kind of an interesting idea. And in a lot of ways, there's a lot of mystics from the Eastern world who practice that same kind of nonviolence and kindness towards all living things. And you'll find that in Buddhism, for example. You'll find that in a lot of religions from the Eastern part of the world. And so anyway, St. Francis becomes sort of the ideal, the patron of all of Italy. And we can see here, we see the archways develop, and with that influence of Islamic architecture. There's St. Francis Master. One of the things that happened at this time is that sometimes we don't know who painted some of these paintings, but we know that there would be like a person who was really good at painting one or two things. And this guy, we know was the same person, the St. Francis Master, but we don't know who he is. But we know that he has a lot of paintings from this place, from this time, around 1300. And here he is, preaching to the birds. And there they are, and some are even coming down. And mysticism, holiness, nonviolence to an extreme. Cimabue, another one of those proto-Renaissance artists, and you can see they're getting a lot of stuff from Byzantine art, from the Eastern world, but again, they're changing things. One thing about Cimabue, I'll zoom in on this, and if you're a painter, it's really kind of cool. Again, this sort of intuitive perspective. Got Christ giving the blessing, all the iconographies there. Look what Cimabue is doing with these wings. And they would talk about these, I've read this a lot. They talk about Cimabue and the stacked angels. So they're not just overlapping, but they go up higher as you go around the throne. Gold leaf, tempera. Tempera is a really interesting medium too. We see that develop in Italy at this time. And it's basically paint that's made with egg. Sounds weird, doesn't it? Yes, sir.
Could you grill the painting and eat it?
No, it'd have pigments and other things in it. But hey, have you ever tried to clean a pot or a frying pan? You didn't use oil and it's not a non-stick pan, and you fried eggs and how they stick? Well, that's really the same thing that makes this paint work so well, is that it dries hard and it stays, you can't get it off. It's just very durable. And so they take the egg, pigment, put it together, and then on top of that, they typically varnish it over the top of this. But Pietro Cavallini, we see that these wings, angels, these guys really go after angels. This will happen, and it'll happen through the Renaissance. There's a guy that is a Renaissance artist, and he was a contemporary of someone like Da Vinci. His name was Fra Angelico. Fra, because he was a monk, a friar, a brother. Fra Angelico, because that's what he did his whole life. He painted angels, just like I was showing you the master of Saint Francis. He was the friar that painted angels, and he did these elaborate wings and stuff. You can see this is kind of falling apart, but look at the naturalism. Here's the other guy that's the proto-Renaissance artist. His name is Giotto. And he starts out, he's doing, this is 1310. And he's enclosed a Madonna with it, sort of a canopy over the Madonna on the throne. And sometimes when you're trying to do things that look lifelike, sometimes having people's faces kind of not being all there, when you cut these off like that, done for a reason, to make it appear more lifelike. And so, you know, they were watching, they were looking around, they say, you know, what if there were all of these angels? Some of them would be hidden behind. You can't just stack everything perfectly like the other Madonnas that we saw, like this, where they all kind of move out of the way and they're perfectly arranged. You go, wow, that's much more lifelike. And Giotto's probably his greatest work. And this is, if you guys were ever, if you wanted to do this one, you could. You can find tons of stuff on the Arena Chapel in Padua, Italy. And this is a place that we have writings from people like Michelangelo and Da Vinci. And they were blown away when they saw the Arena Chapel. It inspired them to be great artists. And I want to point something else here too. This is kind of a thing. It's an old building and it's structurally, it's having some problems. So they reinforced it. Not unusual. If this would have been done in contemporary times, that would probably be able to hide that a little better. But bottom line, but he painted scenes from the Bible all over this chapel. And there's one of them from the Arena Chapel. And you see, this is Palm Sunday. Again, let me zoom in on this. This is, if you're doing naturalism, some people's heads are going to get cut off. You're not going to see everybody all at one time. Not everything is arranged perfectly. And so it's a little more chaotic, which what Raylan was showing us the last time. What was that, a loop you had?
Yeah.
A lyre?
It was a Renaissance
Loop. And the sound hole was this perfect pattern. It was symmetrical from top to bottom and side to side. And we were talking about this as being similar to some of the, like the rose windows in the cathedrals, because it was a kind of a mathematical ordered, the perfect universe that God made was actually mathematically perfect in every sense. And so that has something to do why you see things like I say, like this, or it's perfectly ordered. That's a theological issue. And the randomness, oh, I passed it up. The randomness that we see here that kind of contradicts this perfectly ordered. It doesn't display that at all. This is really kind of an interesting painting, and I don't really know this for sure. But this is, what I do know is that this is Palm Sunday. Christ enters Jerusalem. And they call it Palm Sunday because the people of Jerusalem laid palms down on the road which Christ used to enter Jerusalem. And why would you do that? Well, that's kind of a thing you do for honored people. In Roman times, they would throw flower petals out in front of the emperor. This was a sign of honor and respect. And there was also another practical thing here too. And that is that these were dirt roads. And so this was a lot easier on your donkey, let's say, and but here he is, Jesus, entering Jerusalem. And we have some angels over here, or young people. I don't see the wings, but they're actually pulling down the palm leaves. We say, but this doesn't look like a palm tree. We'll see this happen a lot in art, especially around this time. Artists sometimes were charged with making scenes about things that they had no idea about. So we know what a palm tree looked like. They were from Italy. They weren't from the Middle East. So they kind of did what they could. And these are harvesting those palm leaves to be thrown out in front of Jesus. And so that's the story of Palm Sunday. There's another really fine example from about 100 years after this, was by a guy named Piero della Francesca. And he did this scene, I don't have it here, we're just telling you. He did a scene of Christ's resurrection. And if you know the story in the Christian faith about Christ was crucified, he was buried, and on the third day, on Easter Sunday, he rose from the grave, rose from the dead. And as it is believed that the Romans were guarding the tomb, right? But they fell asleep and Jesus arose and left, and they woke up and said, how could this be? Jesus is not in the tomb anymore. But in that picture, the artist, having no knowledge of what Roman soldiers looked like 1,500 years prior, the soldiers looked like 16th century Italian soldiers. They don't look like Roman soldiers. So anyway, artists that happens a lot. They're painting things that they haven't experienced, they don't really know. Lamentation, this is after they're burying Christ here, after he's taken off from the cross. And this has always been looked at as an advancement in painting too, because look at what's happening here. Emotion. Giotto is painting emotion. We haven't seen that so much, not at all. And so let's see, I think this is Mother Mary. I think this is Magdalene. At any rate, St. John the Apostle, the youngest of the apostles, crying, agony, even the angels flying above. Agony, emotion. Well, that is, yet again, another level of naturalism. And so these guys, by this time, are really kind of moving off the notions that were set down in the Byzantine era. They draw on them very heavily. The iconography comes right out of the Byzantine years, but emotions. This is the betrayal of Jesus. And here is Judas kissing Christ on the cheek. He said, you know, the one that I kiss on the cheek is Jesus, because the Romans didn't know who he was, but they wanted to take him in. He's one of the Pharisees. There he is. Get him, boys. And we got over here St. Peter. You guys know about this. St. Peter wanted to stop him, and he took his knife out and cut the ear off of a Roman soldier.
Ew.
Yeah, it's in the Gospels. And anyway, Jesus.
One of the first things I read every year at Easter.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This is right after the Last Supper. They went to the Garden of Gethsemane. Absolutely. Carter.
Didn't the guy named like Leonardo da Vinci cut off his ear for his girlfriend or something?
That would be Vincent van Gogh.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking.
Well, at any rate, Christ picked up the ear and healed him. Just put it right on and healed it back and admonished Peter, don't do this. Don't fight him. This is anyway. And this kind of, if you look at it this way too, this is not a Roman soldier, but this is likely one of the Pharisees, one of the Jewish hierarchy in the religion that was supposedly had conspired with the Romans to get rid of Jesus. But at any rate, I'm going to leave that alone. Duccio, again, 14 panels illustrating the passion of Jesus. Whoa. You know what this is? A direct thing. And Blake, if you went to Catholic religious upbringing, you would know what this is.
I'm actually Christian, but I have family that were raised Catholic, and even as a Christian, I have seen something similar of these before.
Yeah, it's the Passion, and that movie by Mel Gibson, The Passion of the Christ. It's actually this same story, and you see here. Well, zoom in. This is Christ coming into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, and then the washing of the feet, the Last Supper, and he's going to the Garden of Gethsemane, the betrayal, and so on. So, yeah, this is sort of a precursor why I was talking about the Catholic religion, because there is a similar, and these were Catholics, by the way, the Stations of the Cross, and there are 14 Stations of the Cross. That is a retelling of the Passion of Christ, but it's a little different than this in some ways too, because basically the Stations of the Cross, they talk about his carrying the cross up to Calvary, and when the times that he falls, and how was it Saint Simon washes his face, stuff. But anyway, telling stories. There's that entry into Jerusalem, one of the panels. from that. And again, trying to do deep space. I want to do the road and the gates to the city and everything behind it. Again, it really doesn't look much like Jerusalem either. But again, these artists were charged with painting things that they had never seen. But the idea of doing it realistically, that's exactly it. And this is that intuitive perspective. It doesn't follow laws of mathematical perspective, but it is an attempt to create the illusion of depth and the betrayal of Jesus. Oh, and this is Duccio's version. There he is, Saint Peter cutting off that ear, Judas kissing Christ, the other apostles running away. Let's get out of here.
I've read about this one too many times, and somehow I learn more every time I read it.
Yeah, well, it is. It's a very profound story. It is. And there was something else I wanted to say here too. And that is, as I was talking to you about soldiers, let me zoom in on this, because this is not really what a Roman soldier would look like either. That's more like a 14th century Italian soldier. Just saying. And so anyway, they did the cathedrals in Italy. One of the differences here, though, is that some of these areas that would have been stained glass or low relief sculptures sometimes were painted on the exterior. But what we got here in this regard, we'll talk to you about Islamic art and how in Islamic art, they really shied away. They did not do images. It was the second commandment, graven images. And that was kind of part of what was the problem with doing images in Christianity. But as you can see, by this time, the Christians have kind of abandoned that as a priority. And so Simone Martini, Lipo Mimi. What we have here, and this is a very good example of this. You see now, not only we have the painting, but we have all of the adornment all around, just like this cathedral serves as the frame. We see this and all of this wonderful woodwork, and this thing almost looks like a cathedral itself. And this is called the International style. And it takes elements from Northern Gothic, takes elements from Byzantine Christianity. It takes some of its cues right from Italian art. And so this is a good example of the International style. And here's another one. You see the archways. Actually, the frame helps create the illusion that the painter is making. These floors and everything don't really line up particularly well, but it is an attempt at realism. And it incorporates Gothic art. And so this is another thing that they do in Italy, is that start building towers. This is a Palazzo Pubblico in Siena. And we got another one here in Florence. And so this This is not religious. This is the public plaza. This is about government. And this is another characteristic of late medieval in France. They start to see not only breaking away with a lot of tradition of Christianity, government itself starts to assert power, authority. And so you get these kind of things that this is really a symbol of the government. And in fact, inside the Palazzo Pubblico in Siena, these are the murals in there by Lorenzetti. And it says, peaceful city, detail from the effects of good government and the city and the county. Medieval times, Gothic times, the church, if aligned with a military figure or some other kind of royalty, they were the government. It was monarchy and a pontificate, and basically they kind of shared responsibility of government. And that's why all of the art we've seen has been religious in nature and occasionally celebrating some military accomplishment. Charles the Bald on horseback or something. But everything we've seen has to do with religion, with Christian religion. That was the authority. Wow, look at this. This has the same kind of intuitive perspective of trying to make this all line up, and it really doesn't. But you got the walls of the city, the effects of good government. And this is how things are supposed to work. You have shops, you have free trade, people doing what they like to do. No military in here. This is peace. This is a peaceful city. This is how people are supposed to get along. And you can do this if you got good government. And here's the one from the countryside. And this is the city, and people go out in the morning and work the fields all the way around. And you see, because all of this good government, look, they use this. I mean, look at the crops. This is very prosperous. They're raising more crops than these people would ever be able to eat. They were prosperous. And again, as I said, after the Black Plague, there were a lot fewer people, but they still had all of this arable land. They still had all of this infrastructure and everything still in place. But here, good government. And here is what those murals look like in situ. And there's some other ones here about good government, but whoa, that's like particularly secular. That's not part of the church. This is the beginning of what you might call the separation of church and state. So anyway, that's probably a good place to end. But you see, there is an evolution here of attitudes, of thoughts, and it shows up in the artwork. Their priorities change over this time, and they start to look to the world around them more than they do looking up to heaven or looking into the Bible. Lifelike. And we're kind of getting away from some of the ideas of the first millennia Christianity. So anyway, any questions from any of you guys?
Don't think so.
Okay, Blake, well, in that case. You guys that haven't done quiz 4, please do it. I want to talk about it because it's so cool. The ones I've seen, I've loved. So. See you then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it based on our presentation?
Yes, this is, so what you select. Hopefully, you can change it if you like, but I want you to pick something that you want, and that's part, if you read the prompt, you'll see, that's what I say is to pick something and tell me why you like it.
Are you thinking like my chapter, like a specific chapter, I went over, or if we can choose one?
No, it's a specific work of art or a type or a building or a type of thing. I have somebody doing an obelisk. And there's millions of those, but basically,
Like, well, we like, can we choose it from like one of the things that we went over, like one of the pieces of art?
yes, 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 yes. Austin, wow.
I had a question, so.
Sure.
I was wondering if it's,
Oh, yeah. Well, I already had 2 people doing the pyramids of Egypt. Well, you weren't one of them.
no,
I gotta remember.
I was wondering.
But
if it's like
see,
words, like, is it-
you could do that, you could do that, and you might throw in, if you wish, the Khufu solar boat, which is really
Yeah,
at the
I saw
museum. Yeah, it's right there.
I think you showed us the
Mhm.
picture of the boat.
Yeah,
Yeah, could put that in too.
yeah, but that's a good subject.
I was wondering if, I didn't know if it was like part of the 1400s, so it's like.
Oh, no,
It is.
older than
It
1400s.
is.
So, yeah, it's well within.
Ah,
Yeah, just before 1400. Like I said, about this first slide, this is where they ended. 1400, that's like the cutoff point for this course and for this book.
I see. Well, that's perfect then. I was wondering if I was maybe.
No, you
Doing
got
something
it.
that is after the 1400s, because it's like,
Yeah,
why the pyramids?
okay. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love answering questions. I want you to get clear. I want you to do good, so do well.
I'll try.
Just saying, yeah. All right,
Thank
good.
you.
Any more questions? You can, I had some come in over the weekend on Canvas, so. On the inbox.
Oh, yeah.
I'll show you what I'm talking about. Right there. Oh, I got three of them here, so
I was
I'm
waiting for you.
I'm online, yeah. Yeah. See, but this one here wanted to know if what he had was a good choice. Yes, good choice. So, you know.
I don't know if I wrote the way that you wanted me to write for quiz 4.
Well,
like,
for this one, it's not research, because it's an opinion. You might have to put some research in there, because you gotta kind of acknowledge where you find this stuff. But bottom line, I'm kind of hoping that if you identify what you like about it, that is something to build on.
I did try to identify, I like this because of, like, for instance, like the Great Pyramid of Giza. I just wrote that I like it because of how, what did I write again? Oh, like it took them 20 years to build it. And it's amazing how, like 2,000 people,
Yeah,
it just took 2,000 people to build such a pyramid. I wrote something like that.
Well, that's an excellent point. There are people that talk about these cathedrals, and you'll see there'll be a large time span between when it was begun, when it was finished. And they talked about it because probably so in ancient Egypt, but there were a lot of people that started working on there. And they died and never saw it completed. You know, you spend your life working on something and, you
And
know,
sometimes
it's,
you never get the chance to see
yeah,
the fruits of your labor.
yeah. But the idea that that much energy, that much focus, that much hard work, that much ingenuity, that much sense of purpose.
I look
it's-
at it now, it's.
And it's still
it
here, yeah.
was worth it in the long run.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's something I think I also wrote, like, I think that's amazing how long the permits alive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you got a good choice there. And I think that based on what I've seen from the other two that are doing the pyramids, I think they're coming at it from a little different angle, but that's okay because you can appreciate those pyramids for a lot of reasons. I mean, you know, people have written tons and tons about those. I mean, for thousands of years.
Wait, oh, yeah, by the way, for the PowerPoint presentations, are we allowed to use videos? Maybe to show, like for me, for instance, like the Great Pyramid of Giza is like a video that I saw where it actually take you inside the pathways, the king's chambers, like Khufu's burial tomb.
Yeah.
Can you do that?
Oh, well, I don't know.
Like as long as it's not above maybe like it's like a minute short.
Well, see, and I think that actually my first instinct is say yes. I've never tried to embed something like that on a PowerPoint, but it might just work. I don't know. Technically, I can walk you through that, but
No, I think I know how to do it, but I was just curious of how we allowed to actually put a video.
Yeah.
inside the presentation.
as long as it's not like your whole presentation, like you said, like a minute or something. And you could do the voiceover on that. This is the entrance and this is the first shaft and 100 feet in, here's the first chamber and you know, whatever. Yeah, that sounds cool, actually.
Well, that's about it for me.
All right. You're good.
I see you on Wednesday.
All right, see ya. Be good, Austin.
Maybe two, but that's it.
Uh-huh.